President Trump faces an impeachment push from the House of Representatives. Is it strong enough to move forward? An independent investigation into San Diego County jails finds an alarming number of inmate deaths. And SDG&E proposes rate changes. How much could it cost us customers? I'm Alison St. John, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Alison St. John, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Rob Nicoleski from the San Diego Union Tribune, Kelly Davis, correspondent for the San Diego Union Tribune, and former LA Times bureau chief Tony Perry. After months of debating whether to launch impeachment proceedings, Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi jumped off the fence this week and called for an inquiry of President Trump's communications with the president of Ukraine.
The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the president's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections. Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
So, Tony, Nancy Pelosi has been resisting calls for impeachment for so long. What is it about this latest episode with Ukraine that has made her get off the fence and actually start calling for action?
Well, her Democrats were piling up in terms of how many of them were for impeachment, so it made it harder for the Speaker to say, no, we're not going to go there. And then, of course, there was the whistleblower, which brought up very disturbing events. And then there was an op-ed for the Washington Post written by 7 freshmen who had been on the fence, who hadn't been for impeachment necessarily. And they all have military or national security backgrounds. And they said, enough is enough. This whistleblower information, if true, and since then we've found out that a lot of it is true, is a bridge far too far. And so let's move on it. And within a few hours, Pelosi had said, we're going to begin an investigation about impeachment to see whether there are charges to bring. It's a multi-step, but this is a big step, and it could go directly to suggested charges and a vote by the House of Representatives.
But then, of course, you always have the Senate. And the reason that she's resisted it is because it's been fairly obvious the Senate would never go along with it. What makes her think that the Senate might go along with this now? Well,
she, as am I, she's old enough to remember Nixon. And why was Nixon forced into resignation? Because the Republican graybeards came to him ultimately and said, this is hurting the party. A number of us are going to lose our elections because of you. And he had some respect for the system and for his party. He had other problems, but he did respect the process and his party, and he resigned and took that helicopter that we now know. Now, the question is, will Republicans start to abandon President Trump? Not so much so far. A lot of straddling, a lot of kind of, I haven't read anything yet, or I have questions, a lot of backpedaling.
Well, now, you're old enough to have seen impeachment proceedings a couple of times already. What would you say are the major differences about this set of circumstances?
Of course, the topics that we're talking about. Remember Bill Clinton, 1998, in which he was impeached but not convicted. Mm-hmm. What were the charges that he was impeached on? Lying about having had an affair with a 23-year-old intern in the White House. Remember the great quote, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." He lied about it. And also he tried to get various folks to lie for him and back him up in fighting a suit by Paula Jones, a suit later filed.
So the
House went for those.
The lying was the worst thing.
The lying, yeah, that's obstruction of justice, etc.
And in the case of Nixon, I mean, we also had a situation where you could say, you were just saying the party's reputation was at stake, the nation's constitution was at stake.
But that's, of course, as we speak now, which way is this going to cut? And we were discussing it in the 50th, for example. Is this going to hurt Democrats? The Wall Street Journal editorial page, heavily in favor of Trump, is starting to say, watch out, you Democrats, watch out, you Democrats. You came after our man, you're going to lose your seats.
Well,
we'll see.
What is an inquiry going to give us? We have a lot of the information already. It seems like it's not information that is needed for this thing to move forward.
No, there are a lot of questions. This whistleblower admits that he or she did not see these things, did not hear these things directly, but other folks in the White House told him or her about them. So I suppose those folks can be brought into a closed or open session. So that'll take a while, although the folks on the House Judiciary Committee are talking about moving quickly. And although, again, Nancy Pelosi, she's cautious because I think she is worried that this might relieve some of the pressure of folks that want to see the president held to account, but also may blow up in their faces and lose a few seats, but also the 2020 election.
Do you think it might hurt Joe Biden in this? Because by talking about what President Trump said, you got to talk about what Joe Biden did and what his son did, and you think that might be, he might be like
collateral damage.
That's what
I think very much so that could happen. Although, let's say it, there is no evidence at this moment that Joe Biden did anything untoward involving Ukraine.
Well, there is that quote with him that I've seen where he's saying, I told the Ukraine people, if you want the money,
a whole bunch of money,
and son of a gun, paraphrasing, it happened.
He was there carrying out the orders of the President of the United States and also a number of the European powers, a number of the folks on the European Union. They wanted that prosecutor out because they thought he wasn't doing anything, and they sent Biden over there to carry out their wishes. So it's been kind of turned around. The folks supporting President Trump have turned it around to some sort of admission that he was pulling a prosecutor away from his son. That does not appear to be the case. In fact, that's been looked into, and I would imagine will be looked into as we speak by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all the big boys once again to see what, if anything, is there. So yeah, Trump may get impeached. He may get thrown out. I don't think so, but Biden may be collateral damage.
Kelly.
To go back to the race in the 50th, we had this week Darrell Issa joining the race. We have two other Trump supporters, Carl DeMaio and Duncan Hunter. What do you think impeachment, what kind of impact do you think impeachment will have on that race?
Well, Duncan Hunter, of course, has a series of legal problems of his own.
Well, there's that too.
And he's a big Trump supporter. I haven't heard what Issa is, but I can't imagine he isn't a Trump supporter. Carl DeMaio, the same. It's going to be a knife fight. Those are three tough guys who have been in tough races before. And I don't know that whether he's impeached or not plays. Also, I think by the time that election hits us, what is that, March? Mm-hmm. It's going to be over. It's going to be in the rearview mirror. And I think then, of course, all of Hunter's own legal problems will be front and center.
Since there's going to be so many people running in that race, is that going to split the vote up to fragment it in such a way that the Democrat might be able to...
Or a moderate Republican, if one of them becomes a moderate Republican.
Maybe, but I think to get a Democrat, although the fellow who ran last time did make a credible, although not fantastic showing.
Just narrowly lost to Hunter. But, I mean, with the primary system, it's going to be him against one Republican.
Yeah, and they're going to portray him as a socialist, communist, Islamist.
It's a pretty heavily Republican district.
Exactly.
It's shifting,
exactly.
I live in that area, so it's Alpine. I see, or El Cajon area, but I see younger families moving in. So
I would look for. I know that Carl DeMaio is running around saying he's the front runner based on some polling he claims to have. Issa is going to be tough to be out.
Well, it's interesting because it is the last congressional district that is firmly Republican in San Diego County, so the Republicans are heavily invested in keeping it that way. Do you think Carl DeMaio's accusations that perhaps Issa should have stayed in his district, because of course he declined to run for the 49th, which is now held by Democrat Mike Levin, and Carl DeMaio is saying, well, why didn't he stay in his own district and hang on to it? Why come for somebody else's district?
Yeah, I suppose you can make that argument, and Carl is free to make his argument.
He's running outside of his district.
The law allows it, and it isn't as if they're living in North Dakota and running in Chula Vista. I mean, it is close, and I don't see that it really, that's vote determinative. I mean, it's how well they campaign, how much money they have to spread their message. And it's retail politics. The district, big by district standards, you can still get around the district in your automobile in a day. So,
and there's Brian Jones, speaking of automobiles, who is challenging ISA to come for a Jeep ride with
Absolutely.
him in the backcountry because he says
do
you don't even know this.
Is it a Christmas present for political reporters? I mean, that would be fabulous. And of course, Carl is not to be dismissed. Carl has a following based on his radio show, which was, I think, heavily watched, listened to, and of course he was on the council and made a credible running for mayor. So he's been around, and he knows how to run the issues, and he likes certain taxation issues are his issues. So we'll see. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be, of course, a very interesting election. But speaking of that, just to go back to the impeachment question, one final question, the fact that it comes so close before an election, do you think that will affect its chances? Because people may say, well, why don't you just let us vote instead of conducting an impeachment?
Yeah, what you call your good government answer, that is where people really aren't involved, but they want to say something. That's something that's being said. I don't like what he did, but this impeachment thing, that seems kind of mean. Why don't we just have an election? Well, we will have an election. On the other hand, the Clinton mess, if you will, cost Republicans seats. Democrats picked up 5 seats, even as that was pending. So who
knows how this is going to play
and
out.
I know David Brooks, God bless him, the New York Times columnist and PBS commentator, he has said, watch out what you wish for. He doesn't like Trump any more than a lot of folks. Says impeachment, however, will be stopped in the Senate, is never going to get 2/3 in a Republican Senate with Mitch McConnell right there. But then what happens? Then Trump claims, I've been vindicated, turns it around, and is reelected, much to the chagrin of David Brooks.
And it does make you wonder about our U.S. Constitution as to quite how much it's threatened by all of these developments.
Yeah, we've been through some tough spots, and while I like a good political spat, we got through depressions and wars. I think we'll handle this.
Okay, well, it's nice to end this particular debate on a positive note. So let's move on. 2 San Diego County supervisors are calling for a review of what's happening in county jails following an investigation by the San Diego Union Tribune that revealed 140 people have died in San Diego County jails in the last 10 years. That's roughly 1 death every month. Now, Kelly has been reporting on conditions in our county jails for years, and your numbers show that deaths have been going up faster in the last 10 years since Sheriff Bill Gore was elected than they were in the 10 years prior to his election. So, I mean, do you think that what you're seeing is a result of changes in the jails, or is it more something changes in our community?
I just want to really quickly before I start, just give some credit to Jeff McDonald and Lauren Schroeder, who worked on this project with me.
It was a team investigation.
It was a team effort. So I think part of me expected to see a decrease in the 10 years under Gore versus the 10 prior years. Jails have always held a large number of mentally ill inmates, inmates who are coming in intoxicated on drugs. They're detoxing. Maybe they've smuggled drugs in. So there's always been these problems. But in the last 10 years, there have been throughout the U.S. more research on how to better handle this difficult population, and so there's been more training, more research, more equipment brought in. So you'd think that things are getting better and you'd see fewer deaths. And we just didn't. We saw, an increase of 101 to 140 under Gore. So I think it's surprising just because you think as time progresses, things should get better. Yeah.
And in San Diego, we are so much worse than other counties around California. How much worse are your figures suggesting?
We used a methodology that the Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics uses. They do reports on mortality in jails and prisons. So using the same methodology they use, we looked at the 6 largest jail systems in California. And we looked at their mortality rates and their suicide rates, and San Diego is by far ahead of everyone, just looking at large jail systems.
Okay, we actually have a graphic to show how ethnically, the breakdown of how it's affecting different ethnic groups. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's, is that a factor in who is dying in the jails?
The sheriff will argue that they book more white males, and so that's why their suicide numbers are higher. I think we saw, pretty even distribution. Very few women die in jail.
Interesting.
I'm not sure why
that is.
Why that is. That's definitely something
I know
I'd like to look into.
You don't claim to have the answer, but is there anything from your research that you feel can help explain why San Diego is so much worse than other counties?
As we say in the story, there's no easy answer. We looked at a lot of specific cases and what went wrong in those cases, and it ranges from folks not getting the medication that they need, warning signs that an inmate was suicidal, lots of cases where an inmate with serious mental illness ended up dying from a disease that should be treatable, pneumonia, stomach ulcers, diabetes. So there's a question of whether their requests for help were unanswered, or were they not able to articulate what was going on with them. And then there's some things that could have been fixed sooner, like the jails were very slow to add metal grates to the second. 3 of the jails have 2 levels, and people were jumping over and harming or committing suicide that way. And the jails were surprisingly slow to add, a simple fencing or grate that would have prevented that. And I think even now, not all the second levels have that fencing.
Kelly, I've been here a long time. I'm as cynical as any other journalist. And it takes a lot to shock me, and I found your reporting so detailed and shocking, and I'm saying, in San Diego County, how does this happen? Any thought, and you mentioned the Department of Justice, any thought of bringing them in for an audit? When the San Diego Police Department in 2014-15 had problems, they voluntarily said, DOJ, send the folks in, audit us. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Is it going to be all internal, a couple of supervisors thinking about it, and the sheriff looking at some things? I mean, any thought of bringing the DOJ and have an outside hard-nosed look?
I think, the supervisors said they're going to work with the sheriff on finding out what best practices are. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence. I do think there needs to be an outside review. Back in, help me with this.
2014?
I think but also 2005. I think there were a spate of officer-involved
shootings. We led the nation there for a while.
With the sheriff's department, and they brought in the Office of Independent Review from Los Angeles, a highly respected entity that is still around. So why not bring in those guys and just so we can get these outside eyes. I know the sheriff's department has had some consultants come in. I had to sue to get one of those consultant reports, and those reports, which we're going to be writing about, were very critical and had a lot of recommendations that were not addressed, or they're being addressed. But when you've got an issue like this, and behind the scenes, and we got some documents that shows that they did think this was a problem. They did know this was a problem. They just won't admit it publicly.
Well, the
and
sheriff's...
your reporting suggests, though, that only really 2 of the supervisors have gotten their hands on this thing.
That's a good point. What
why
about
not
the other
all
3?
5? Come on, people are dying here.
And
hundreds and millions of dollars.
The supervisors are the ones that are signing off. They see these settlements.
So why?
I have Bill Gore is very well liked, well respected.
Of course, we all like Bill.
He wouldn't talk to us for this story. I'd love to sit down and just have a chat with him on this. And there are at least a dozen pending lawsuits, and some of these lawsuits are really bad.
It's costing the county millions of dollars.
The county, I'd say, over the next 2 or 3 years, will be paying out millions more.
So the sheriff has been elected sheriff 3 times. Do you think that his future could depend on whether he addresses this more effectively?
No.
No, this is San Diego.
It's San Diego. I don't think people really know what their sheriff does, and unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people care about what happens to inmates, but they should know that the county is self-insured, so this money that's going to these lawsuits is taxpayer money. So there's an impact.
And you're going to stay on this, right?
I hope
Bill Gore
so.
has not heard the last of you? Excellent. Bill,
Yeah.
let's have an interview.
Yeah, if the UT will allow me, I would love to continue
You've
reporting
done
this
some-
because there are many more stories
work.
to tell.
Your reporting has been really phenomenal. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we need to move on to the next topic here. San Diego Gas and Electric has just been granted a rate increase that will affect all our electricity bills. But the power company is also proposing to change the rate structure in two key ways. First, to get rid of higher prices in summer months, and secondly, to impose a bigger minimum basic bill that everybody would have to pay, however much electricity they use. So now, Rob, you've been covering power for many, many years. Talk to us a little bit about why the first change, getting rid of the seasonal differences, will help.
Well, it's a proposal from SDG&E to the California Public Utilities Commission. They can't do anything without the California Public Utilities Commission's approval. And the way seasonal pricing works is that since we have higher demand in the summertime because people are running their air conditioners and it's hot, then the pricing is higher in the summer than it is in the winter.
So this is something to do with climate change in a way. We're adapting to climate change.
I guess so, but there's 5 summer months. They run from June through October. And to give you an idea, the peak price during time of use during the summertime is 46 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, compare that to the wintertime prices, which is the remaining 7 months of the year. That's 26 cents per kilowatt hour at its peak. And so, naturally, since it's going to be more expensive in the summertime, you're going to run more electricity in the summertime, you're going to have a higher bill in the summer. So what SDG&E is suggesting is that they kind of even things out. It should be stated that you're not going to be saving any money in the long run, but there is this volatility between the summer months and the winter months. So what they're suggesting is you pay $7 more you get $7 savings in the summertime. Your bill goes down $7. But then during the winter months, when the price is less expensive, it's raised by 6 cents. So $6. So it's a wash. And in some ways, you're just kind of moving the furniture around.
Right. What happened to the incentive to try to get people to use power in a way that would help us use sustainable energy more? I mean, isn't this supposed to be encouraging people to conserve energy?
Well, that's one of the reasons why they've got seasonal pricing. Though
Right.
I think that's why the Public Utilities Commission
changing
has
that,
this.
Why would they stop that now?
Well, because of the price volatility. Like last summer, especially, we had a sweltering summer, and under tiered rates, it gets complicated. You got time of use rates, and under tiered rates, they have something that's called a high usage charge. And if you go over 4 times what your allotment is, then the price really spikes. And last year, a lot of people paid a lot more money for their electricity
So who would actually
rates.
be the winners under this proposal if they do get rid of the seasonal rates? And who would be the losers?
I guess the winners would be, and also in SDG&E's defense, the Utility Reform Network, TURN, has said they like the idea of change or getting rid or
Sticker-shock for
evening
air
out.
conditioning.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly for seasonal rates. But I think that there is opposition there from people saying it's really not going to make any changes. You're not getting lower rates. You're just adjusting the volatility
Right.
a little
What
bit.
about that community-based plan that Kevin Faulkner and others are pushing? Is that going to, are we all going to be dancing, or will these kind of complexities be available under a different ownership?
Well, CCAs, which we're talking about, community choice aggregation, that City of San Diego and a number of other cities have signed up for, how these things, whether it's rates, whether any other proposals and things that the CPUC gives SDG&E the permission to do, how that affects CCAs is complicated, because what ends up happening with the CCA only takes care of one aspect of the entire top-down utility budget. So when you look at your SDG&E bill, you'll see something that says electricity generation, and that's a decent chunk of what your bill is. Now, electricity generation is something the CCA takes over. They purchase the power. Now, the other two legs of that stool, transmission and distribution, that doesn't fall under the rubric of a CCA. So for various programs, for example, like SDG&E has electric vehicle charging programs that they're spending a lot of money on, and that the CPUC wants the utilities to spend a lot of money on, that's basically not electricity generation.
So basically, this is a very complex issue, and
Yes.
what we do know is that our rates are going to go up, and that also the minimum rate is going to go up if this proposal is.
Yeah,
and we run out of time.
Oh, okay.
But,
Yes.
but essentially, it's not a surprise, I guess, that the rates are changing. But you've written three very good articles about all the changes. So, okay, thank you so much. So that wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. And thank you so much to Rob Nicoleski from the San Diego Union Tribune, correspondent for the UT, Kelly Davis, and former LA Times reporter Tony Perry for joining me. A reminder, all of the stories that we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Alison St. John. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.